Welcome to Kev's Travel Stories. Each week I'll be bringing you a story from the weird and wonderful world of travel, a world that can change the way you see life and love and even the way we find meaning. Places that are iconic and sometimes surprising and even terrifying. So sit back and enjoy while we go on a magical mystery tour together. Welcome to Kevin's Travel Stories, and in this episode I'm going to talk about an almost impossible situation where you travel in hope rather than knowledge. Yes, it was a day in 2006, the 17th of May to be exact, at the Stade de France, Paris. Arsenal were to take on Barcelona. Now, my son was a young man. He was an Arsenal supporter, and I thought I'd treat him to a trip over to the final. Now, we could have bought tickets and a package to go all in. They were very expensive, and we turned down the opportunity. I think in retrospect now, if I was going to go to any big event, Ryder Cup, the Masters, World Cup, the tennis US Open, I would make sure that I have bought a package that includes the ticket. So that was the lesson I learnt. In those days, I was a travel writer who was doing very well. I was welcomed around the world because I had a big column. Still do actually have a big column, but in those days I thought once we get there, we'll get the tickets, no problem. We won't bother. They'll be easy to pick up on the black market. So off myself and Ciaran went. We got a flight over to Paris, and I was staying at accommodation that was provided by a friend of mine, Robert Byrne. It was in the Arab Quarter, a very interesting quarter actually, a part of Paris, and we had 3 nights there, a couple of meals arranged, and we started our journey to find the tickets so we could go and see Arsenal play in the Champions League final. Well, this is when the troubles started. I remember we went to a very beautiful restaurant that was hosting us right off the Champs-Élysées, and I talked to the concierge because they're the people who always know. He looked at me and he looked at my son and he said, "Are you joking?" Very like the Pink Panther, Peter Sellers. He started laughing. I said, "Well, what's so funny?" I didn't find it that funny, and I certainly don't think Ciaran found it funny. And what happened was he said, "Listen, that's been sold out for an absolute age." Well, we got a bit crestfallen. And then worse things happened. Ciaran discovered that on Sky News, we saw tens of thousands of fans on the Champs-Élysées. And then we saw that Sky News had reported that one fan had paid, wait for it, this is in 2006, €4,000 for one ticket, which, believe this or not, turned out to be a fake. Oh my goodness me. I had a small budget. I thought, well, maybe we'll get them for $300-400 each. We'll both jump in there. That would be great. Those plans were torn up and thrown in the bin, and I started to check my bank account, and I thought, well, listen, it's obviously going to cost a lot more, but let's keep looking. Anyway, we had a great couple of days, and you can see on my podcast how to do 5 things: eat, drink, sleep, shop, and sightsee in Paris, as sister podcasts to this. And we took the same advice. We went to the Louvre, we went on the Baton Mouche, we went around the galleries and ate and drank. It was wonderful, but slowly the options started to close in, and by the day the final had arrived, Ciaran, I have to say, had gone into a slight depression. Now, there's always differences between fathers and sons, as anybody who's a father will know. And that can be challenging, and it can be also wonderful. But this was a big difference. Ciaran was quite convinced at this stage we would not be getting tickets. I had a certainty. I was absolutely convinced we would get tickets. And even if I had to give up going myself, I was convinced we would get a ticket. But As we walked around the streets, we bumped into other fans. We asked. No, 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 came the response from the Spanish, from the Barcelona fans. No, we don't know anywhere. From the Arsenal fans, sorry, mate, I don't have a clue, mate. No, no, we've got ours. And it did start to look quite grim. We made our way, packed trains out to the wonderful Parc de France, the absolutely amazing place where the final, this extraordinary stadium, and we stood outside and looked up. And I remember a couple of things. We'd seen, when we visited earlier, we'd seen some of the legends of Arsenal holding the Champions Cup. There were a lot, obviously, for these finals, a lot of the former, great names do actually turn up, and they're greeted and wined and dined. And we saw a couple of those. I think Tony Adams holding the cup was a highlight for Ciaran. But when we arrived just 2 hours before the match was due to start, things were starting to look grim. I talked to one guy, and I think he asked for €6,000. Rather nasty, I thought, to really, considering they cost a couple of €100 each, the tickets. And things were getting desperate. I remember I had a couple of €1,000 in my pocket, and I was going to go. That was my limit, but I still kept the faith. I thought, no, it's going to happen. And then, just half an hour before the match started, I went off one way, Ciaran went off the other. I offered a little prayer. By now you could hear the sound, the buzz of the stadium throbbing, and we were on the outside. You could see all of these very stern-looking stormtroopers. There was going to be no football hooliganism at this stadium tonight. They were gathering around, looking at us up and down. There was the smell of excitement in the air, cigarette smoke. You could see people drinking and hot dog stands selling their goods. There was the flags of each of the fan sets, their chants, the Barcelona fans in their wonderful deep wine-coloured kit, the Arsenal fans in their white and red. You could hear this mixture of the accents and the voices and the chants and horns going off. It was so exciting. We had no tickets. Okay, last chance, Ciaran. You go that way, I'll go this way. Meet back here in 10 minutes. That's it. I asked 2 more people. They laughed in my face. They actually laughed in my face. I came back. I saw Ciaran meandering. He had been looking very crestfallen. But suddenly his shoulders were back, and there was a smile on his face, and he had someone with him. And he said, yes, Dad, I got someone. Look, and it turned out that this family, a decent family, the father had taken 2 sons and a friend. The friend had got sick, so they had a spare ticket. And he offered it to me for, I was prepared to go up to maybe if the worst came, 3,000. A bargain at €1,500. Can you believe it? You'd think it's a bargain handing over €1,500 in 2006 for one ticket. But I was so delighted. My instinct had been proven right. Ciaran got his ticket. He went in. I remember I left. I went back into town. We knew we were going to meet later. I heard that Arsenal had a man sent off. And then I heard Hans Lehmann, the goalkeeper no less, after 18 minutes. And then I heard another roar. Arsenal scored, believe it or not. And then, slowly but surely, Barcelona, who were then the Pep Guardiola team, had Ronaldinho, a young Messi, Eto'o. They scored, Samuel Eto'o scored, then Giuliano Belletti scored, and that, I'm afraid, was that. But later on, myself and Ciaran met in the Arab Quarter. We had a drink, and it was a great end to a really wonderful occasion. I mean, it really is not advisable to turn up at these events without a ticket. They're really like dust. I mean, UEFA usually allocates about 70,000, 20,000 to each club. Most of the rest go to sponsors and the football associations and the allocadoos. So it's really difficult unless you're lucky or you know someone. And of course, there's always the chance, like many people there, will get ripped off. But luckily we went. Luckily we got our ticket. Luckily Ciaran got to see Arsenal, even though they lost. And that really bookended our trips to great matches, which started off, of course, with my podcast of when I lost Ciaran when he was a young lad at the World Cup in the Giant Stadium, another podcast you can check. So that was that. Don't please go to any big sporting event unless you have a ticket, unless, of course, you want to go on a different adventure. And what was wrong with that? Because we had a great time.